Making meaning by speaking and listening is a natural ability, but it is difficult to learn in any language or symbolic system. And as we've seen, it takes a lot of effort for the individual and the group that they are part of, both informally and as well as part of formal education. Reading and writing, on the other hand, are human artifacts and even more complex. These forms came into being much more recently in human history, roughly about 6,000 to 8,000 years. There's some debate about it, but certainly in recent human time. They have, however, a powerful influence for success in the modern world, both in and out of school. And because of this, there's a lot of pressure to learn to read and write, and many theories and debates about how best to do it. For example, we've discussed a little bit so far, and we will again now, the way in which traditional grammar tries to help us understand the way reading and writing makes meaning. Noam Chomsky's transformational grammar introduced more deeper understandings. And then, of course, Michael Halliday's systemic functional linguistics are some of the approaches, the theoretical approaches to understanding reading and writing. And to these, we have added our own multiliteracies approach, which we've called design analysis of text. But what I need to say to you is that there is no simple answer to learning to read and write, and reading in particular. It is important to know the whole field, all the theories and debates, and to have a repertoire of approaches in order to meet the needs of your individual learners.
In this section of our videos about literacies, we're going to look at one aspect of what we call the written mode, and that is the reading aspect. In the next section, we're going to look at the writing aspect, but here we're thinking specifically about learning to read. So, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off with what was characteristically the approach of didactic literacy pedagogy, and actually still is its main approach, which is an approach which is called phonics. Sometimes it's called phonemic awareness, which is a bit of a gentler version of the same idea. And what the basic idea behind phonics is, look, there are 26 letters in the English language, and there are probably 47 sounds. In fact, the number of sounds, it's a bit hard to work out. I'm going to get to that in a moment, but there are probably something like 47 different sounds. So between some letters have several different sounds that go with them, like E can be a long E, or E, for example, or A can be a long A, or A, depending on how the word's spelt. So that's how you get 47 sounds out of 26 letters. And also there are diphthongs, which are combinations of letters which form words. So here we are here looking at a page from an old reading textbook, beginning reading, d becomes red, n becomes hen. So in other words, what we do is we take the constituent parts of language, we learn the sound to letter correspondences, and we sound things out. And so in other words, it's like a jigsaw puzzle where we put the pieces back together again. Here, if you like, is a little kind of conceptual snapshot of what's going on in phonics. So what we do is our basic unit in phonics, we have these things called phonemes, which are the letters of the alphabet, but also groups, diphthongs, for example, that represent sounds. So that's the basic thing that we were dealing with in that textbook a minute ago. We also have vowel-consonant combinations which make particular sounds. And we have these units called syllables, which are sound units. So in a word, we can break a word up into sound units, and in a way they form the letters don't get sounded out separately. They form these very cohesive units. And then we have words which consist of a number of syllables where those words are closely tied together, which often represent an idea, sometimes several ideas, encapsulated in one word. So, and in writing, you can recognize words by visually the spaces that are around them.
The first point, and the main point I want to repeat in this unit, is that written language is very different from spoken language in significant ways, and we're going to explore these ways together. We are interested in the ways in which meaning is designed across different modes. So we will introduce you to some meta-language, the conceptual tools for understanding these differences. At the most basic level, with reading, we are dealing with phonemes, that is the sounds of letters of alphabets, or in fact any symbolic system, which are made by the mouth. They are utterances. And the second basic item is the grapheme. These are the symbols in writing, the letters of the alphabet, punctuation, the smallest unit of meaning making in writing and reading. These are marks on any surface, paper, screens and walls, any kind of surface. And from this, of course, we go on to understand vowels and consonants and syllables and spelling and words and vocabulary.
The whole problem with phonics, which we're going to get to in a moment, is it's just far too simple. Language is just much more complicated. And here I've got some examples, just a few examples of the ways in which it is very, very, very complicated. So in other words, particular sounds can be represented in letters in a large variety of ways. For example, the A sound in ate, in steak, in veil, in obey. That's the A sound, and it's spelt in these very different kinds of ways. We also have blends, vowels and consonants, which stick together in peculiar kinds of ways. We have silent letters, but also across different dialects, we have quite significant differences in the way in which a word which is written the same way is sounded out in a different dialogue. And of course, from one person to another, we have different ways of speaking which are subtly different. So it's very, very complicated. And when we come to syllables, it gets even more complicated. In fact, sound units are syllables, and the letters get really knocked together in quite distinctive kinds of ways. And in English, there are roughly 5,000 different syllables or sound clusters, which are in a way peculiar to each other. But the other thing is, when we get to the level of words, in speech, words run into each other, their beginnings and endings are often hard to hear, and they don't correspond with meanings directly a lot of the time. So sometimes, as I mentioned before, a meaning crosses several words, or one word has several meaning units in it. We also have homophones, words which sound the same but have different meanings. We have homographs, which are words which look the same but have different meanings. And we also, and some of these, like the word set, for example. If I use the word set, which happens, by the way, just as a piece of triviality and whatever, to be the hardest word in the English language because, and I define it this way, it's the hardest word in the English language because it has the longest Oxford English Dictionary definition. It can be used in so many different ways. So in other words, the meaning of a word and the sound of a word don't at all correspond. So if you like, okay, there are phonics rules, but the rules become incredibly complicated and incredibly hard to deal with.